Gentlemen, dads, we are so honored this week to have a guy that I met recently online. Some guys I know were talking to him, some really high level dudes, and they're like, "This guy's awesome." And I'm like, "Who the heck is this guy?" And I checked out his Facebook feed a little bit, and I'm like, "Wow, he's got some cool stuff." Next thing you know, it turns into a much bigger story than I even realized at that time. So everybody, I want you to meet a man who's got a counseling degree, a pastor. He's got a book written, which is, I've read a book called The Mind of Christ. He's got a really cool website called Desire Jesus, where he's got a whole bunch of his own podcasts on there. And also has a future book coming out with Penguin House. I'm like, holy cow, blown away, major thing. Um, it's called Dwell on These Things. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right, all right. So we're on, and I'll do my best to get your last name correct, since most people don't get mine correct either. John Stange.
You nailed it. You got it right.
Woohoo!
Great job.
Well, that was the podcast, folks. I just wanted to see
That's
if I
it.
could do that with pressure. Welcome, John, man. I'm so excited to have you with us. I love your background and just love everything that I've gotten to know about you up till now. And having listened to a number of your podcasts already, and right before you clicked on, I was listening to another one, just getting in tune and getting in sync and vibe with you. So thank you so much for coming on with us today,
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
and then taking kind of your specialty and then pouring into the Christian dad things that you've learned and helping us become better dads, fathers, and sharing that with others is kind of our mission. So man,
Awesome.
yeah, yeah. So I before we started, we talked about kind of what you'd like to share with some guys. And I'm like, boom, that's a perfect topic. I've got some of my own. However, let's go with that one. So what
Sure.
what type things when you think of being a Christian dad do you think of, and what's a good thing to share with our audience?
Well, so my wife and I have been blessed with 4 kids. Our kids at this point are ages 20, 18, 16, and 14. So I always wondered what it was going to be like when they were all teenagers at the same time. The oldest just graduated now to the 20s, so 75% of them are teenagers at the same time. Those of you that are looking forward to that day, let me just affirm to your heart that it is difficult. It's fun, but it's not easy. Every season of parenting has its challenges, but there's a variety of things that I try to keep in mind when I'm just being a dad. And simple things like just making sure I'm carving out time for the kids. We've got all sorts of routines, things that we enforce, ways in which I discipline, how I differentiate between irresponsibility and direct defiance. And um, and then the big thing that we were talking about even before we started the show here today is the fact that one of the big concerns that I have as a father is that I want to model the message of the gospel to my kids in all contexts. So I want to model that in the way I speak to them, in the way that I spend time with them, in the way I try to lead them. I want to give them a glimpse of the heart of Christ in how their dad treats them and how he interacts with them. And so that's what I'm trying to do. If there's a time for mercy, there's a time for discipline, there's a time to just show just such undeserved favor and undeserved grace. And these are all things that, as a recipient of them from Christ, I'm trying to be mindful to show them to my children, and then also show myself grace and mercy when I feel like maybe I don't do it quite perfectly, which is always right. so
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 so even
I
a
got to
guy
preach
like
that.
you
Yeah,
occasionally has some lapses, huh?
yeah, occasionally every day.
Oh man, I was talking to a guy last week and he says, can you think of a time? I'm like, you mean like 15 minutes ago?
Yeah, exactly.
Like I got one that's really vivid for some reason.
Right.
Oh, I love that. So kind of modeling Christ for your kids. So in
Mhm.
order to do that, obviously you've got to get to know Christ, huh?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, walk with him, invest in that relationship, spend time in the word, spend time in prayer, and surround myself as well with people that are godly influences on me. And that definitely is helpful as I'm trying to invest in the lives of the children that the Lord's blessed my wife and I with.
That's a nugget right there, is having people around you. That's one thing I'm actively trying to do is, keep my core group of people that I hang out
Right.
with pretty tight. I got blessed and got to see a guy, he was a, major, major dude in the mafia, and
Oh,
he's the
boy.
only guy that was able to leave and live. So he
Hmm.
publicly left, and he's still alive today, and he goes out and does his thing, and his message one of his messages was, "If I learned anything in my life,
Hmm.
it's who you hang with."
Yeah,
And I'm like, "Wow," and he's a Christ follower now, so he flipped
that's
his
awesome.
life over, but so that's a big, big, big one. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, you wanna be selective about who you allow to influence you from the things that you read, from the things that you listen to, from the people that you spend time with, from the people that you allow your heart to admire. You wanna make sure that the people that you're giving a spot of influence in your life are going to steer you in the right direction and reinforce the things that Christ teaches in his word.
So for the guys that are listening right now, they're like, "Okay, but I don't feel like I'm quite there yet. Like I'm over here and Christ is over here." And we kind of meet sometimes and then we separate a bit. Any advice on how to bridge that gap for the guys?
I think a helpful thing would be to kinda observe the pattern that Christ has in, for instance, like the Gospel of Luke. Right now on Wednesday evenings, I've been going through the Gospel of Luke with my church family, and we've been studying it, and it's fascinating to see how Christ was willing to interact with all kinds of people and how he made himself available to all kinds of people. I think sometimes it's helpful to read something like that because it reassures our heart that Christ desires to have fellowship with us, that he desires to have a relationship with us. If somebody feels distant from the Lord, it may be that they're convinced that Christ doesn't want to spend time with them, or they don't feel like the Lord desires to welcome them into his presence, or something along those lines. And when you look at the examples that Jesus gives us in scripture, we could see that I mean, right now we're celebrating the Christmas season, right? We're celebrating the fact that Christ came to this earth and chose to interact with humanity. He didn't hold himself off at a distance from us. He came to us. And I think sometimes it maybe is a little bit difficult for some of us to think that Christ would actively want to do that. But even when you look at something like Philippians chapter 2, in Philippians 2, it talks about the fact that Christ humbly came to this earth and took the form of a servant because he wanted to serve us. And so he wasn't trying to hold himself off at a distance from us. He took on flesh, became one of us, walked this earth as a man, and did so that he could serve us, so that ultimately we could have a close, abiding, deep fellowship with him. And so I think those things are taught all throughout scripture, and I think it's helpful for us to reinforce those truths to our minds and to our hearts. But it could be that that would be a message that a guy needs to start preaching to his heart if he feels like he's distant from Christ. It's not Christ creating that distance, it's the man. Christ has come to us, and offers himself to us and invites us to come to know him and to fellowship with him. And we're given the opportunity to do that, and it's worth seizing that opportunity for sure.
Yeah, when you say that, it's funny that my way to solve that problem back when I needed to solve that problem, and still sometimes daily I feel like, hey, I've pulled away a little bit in whatever reason, but I did an affirmation. So really, really simple. I am worthy. And then, I applied it to different areas of life, but every day I just said out loud with emotion and conviction, I am worthy of God's love. And I
Yeah, and
just,
it's helpful to remind yourself of things that are true. And I think a great list, if people wanted a list of things that they could start preaching to their hearts, you find that in Ephesians chapter 1, where it just goes through a whole bunch of things that are true of us in Christ. And it just lists them over and over. The fact that through faith in Christ we are adopted into the family of God, that we are seen as holy and blameless in his sight. Just that we are loved, that we are blessed, that we have an inheritance in his kingdom that cannot be taken from us. These are the type of things that we should be preaching to our hearts. These are the type of things that our mind should be dwelling on. And it's kind of neat when you get to a chapter like Ephesians 1 because it just lists a whole bunch of them out there for us and puts them all in a very condensed spot where you just look at them all in one spot or many of them right there in one spot.
I love that. I love like the Beatitudes and just things where you got
Hmm.
it's all right there. I just need this one paragraph for a while.
Right. Yeah. You could dwell on that. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, and leading into your next book, dwell on that.
Well, yeah, dwell on these things. I know it's well, we got to be preaching the gospel to our own hearts. It's funny. I think to so I'm a pastor. I've been a pastor for 23 years, and I spent a lot of time teaching and preaching. And for years, there are people that are part of our church family that have heard me preach. But as many years as I have been preaching to them, really, when you analyze a typical week, let's say I have the opportunity to preach or teach to them for an hour, maybe 2 hours, right, in a given week. That's nothing compared to how much time they have the opportunity to preach to themselves. There's no one that's going to be able to preach to you more than you can preach to yourself. And so when I wrote, I have the book that I have coming out. It's coming out in May. It's called "Dwell on These Things," and it's really a book about preaching the right things to your heart, making that a pattern of your life so that you start talking to yourself or preaching the gospel to yourself in the same way that the Lord's speaking to you. When you look at what God says to you, you want to make sure that the message that you're preaching to your own heart lines up with what God actually is saying. Because so often people start preaching a false gospel to their heart where they say, I'm unloved or I am unwelcomed or because I'm not perfect yet, the Lord certainly doesn't want me anywhere near him. And then you look at what scripture actually says, and it says, no, you are deeply loved, and Christ demonstrated that to you. You are welcomed into the presence of God through Jesus Christ. You're holy and blameless in his sight. That's how he sees you because the righteousness of Christ was added to your account the moment you trusted in him. And so, those are things that we should be preaching to our heart. We shouldn't be preaching a false gospel. We should be preaching the real gospel. And as we preach that, then our mind can start dwelling on that. We can think about that. And it definitely has an impact on just our own perspective. It has an impact on how we treat our wife. It has an impact on how we treat our children. If we're preaching the right thing to ourselves, we're going to be in a spot where we're operating from a healthier perspective, and that's going to impact how we treat them. But it's also going to impact the message we communicate to them. If I'm preaching something unhealthy to my heart, that's going to come up in my conversations with my wife, and it's ultimately going to result in me preaching something unhealthy to her. If I'm preaching something unhealthy to my heart, that's gonna come out in how I interact with my children, and I'm gonna end up speaking things to them that are unhelpful and unwise and ungodly. So I've got to be preaching the truth to my heart so that I could be communicating the truth to them. And I think it has a huge impact on the culture of our households. If our household is a gospel saturated culture, it makes a huge difference.
Mm, that's fantastic. I've got this CD in my car, and I forgot that it was in the CD player, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that CD's in there. Let me hit the thing." And it's a group of people just saying prayers.
Oh yeah.
And my daughter was in the back, and my youngest daughter, and she was just getting a little anxious.
Hmm.
And I said, "Honey, I get it. Like that. It, sometimes I feel that way as well, and I feel that anxiety and stuff. And you know what I do? Sometimes I just pray, and sometimes I
Hmm.
pray prayers like these. Matter of fact, I was praying before we jumped in, and the prayers are on. I'm just going to pray, and I started praying and going along with what was on the CD, and all of a sudden she starts praying. Totally calms down, anxiety's gone, and we go to her soccer game and we leave and CD's still on. She's like, "Hey daddy, can we listen to music now?"
Yeah, right. She's
I
like, "You
said, "Oh
made
yeah,
your
of
point,
course."
dad. Let's listen to some music."
Yeah, yeah, but it was great, and I'm like, how funny that she just turned 7, 7-year-old fell right in line and just went right along with it and didn't fight me. Where
That's
maybe
great.
if I used any other type communication, maybe we'd have continued to feel that strife and anxiety and everything. Have you got an example, lately or from when your kids were younger, whenever, of something that came up, either a thought or an action where you can share a story like that?
Uh, One of the things that stands out in my mind, from childhood, for my kids' childhood, not my childhood, the where I really felt like I had a unique opportunity to communicate the heart of the gospel, to my one of my sons in particular, happened after he got in trouble. And I don't distinctly remember what he did. None of us remembers that what he actually did. He was still pretty young, and we differentiate how we disciplined our children based on irresponsibility or defiance. So some people, think that physical punishment like spanking is never appropriate. I fall into the camp of I think it's appropriate for young children in instances of direct defiance, but not appropriate for irresponsibility. So we
Yep.
always just saved that for and so it rarely had to be used, but when it was used, it was serious. And he had defied either me or his mother in some way, and I don't recall. So this was in our context here a spankable offense. And I brought him into the room and I said, "All right, you understand that what you did was the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do. And you knew the right thing to do, and you did the wrong thing anyway. You defied us, and you understand what comes next, right?" And he said, "Yeah." He was very matter of fact. He understood. And I said, "So you know that I have to spank now, right?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "All right, well, get ready because here it comes." And he kind of tensed up and got ready, and I was wearing shorts, and I remember I took my hand and I slapped myself, not him. I took his spank for him. I spanked my leg, and I did it way harder than I ever would have spanked him, but I wanted it to leave a mark on my leg that he would see, and I wanted him to see, like a red handprint. And I just kinda kept him nearby in that moment, and I said and he was shocked. He's like, "What happened?" And I said, "Well, I said the punishment required a spank, right? And you agreed." And he said, "Yeah, I did." And I said, "Okay, well, I took it for you. I took your punishment for you." And he could see, at that point, the mark on my leg, and he heard the sound, and he knew and he could tell that I had spanked my leg way harder than I had ever spanked him. And then I segued the conversation into the fact that you understand that Christ has done that for us, that's exactly what Jesus did for us. When he came to this earth, he came to people who deserved punishment, and the punishment that our sin deserved was death. And that's what scripture tells us. We deserve death. And so what did Christ come to do? What did he do? He came and ultimately he was tortured and died on the cross. He died in our place and then rose from the grave. He defeated the power of death. And now he shares that victory with us. If we trust in him, he's taken our punishment upon himself and he's secured our victory, and that victory can become ours. And I said, so, I hope that you'll remember this moment as something that is a useful reminder of what Christ has actually done for us. We deserved punishment, so he took it upon himself so that we could receive his mercy, so that we could receive his grace.
And
That's one of the stories that stands out in my mind
he
from
was
his
pretty
childhood.
young, it sounds like, when that happened.
Yeah, he was pretty young. Yeah, he was probably maybe about 4 years old, somewhere in that range.
Does he have a memory of that at all?
He does. Oh, yeah, he remembers it. Yeah, it stayed in his mind.
That's awesome. I know
Mhm.
sometimes you can recreate the memory by reminding, "Oh,
Right.
yeah." But no, this one stuck with him.
It did. Yeah, it stuck with him. Yeah.
I was just that seems like something that would stick with me or a child or, like that
Mhm.
that was, "Hey, you didn't do what I expected you to do. That was different.
Right.
That was a screwball."
Yeah. Yeah, you threw me a curve, dad. And then they also feel compassion too in the sense that they're like, "Wow, I goofed up and now dad's the one with a sore spot on his leg," and just trying to teach them to have a more sensitive heart to the consequences of their actions. But yeah, I always want to, and even still, even though so that son is 18 now, he's a freshman in college at this point. But even still, one of my desires, my big desires, to communicate the heart of the gospel to them in all sorts of things. I mean, there are moments even now where, obviously, and it can be much elevated as they get older, where decisions they make have much more consequence than the things that they decided when they were in single digits.
Yeah.
And even still, it's a great opportunity for teaching, for instruction, for showing grace, for showing mercy, for demonstrating unconditional love, you we it seems like we never run out of opportunities to demonstrate those things.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Have you got any advice for I wasn't expecting us to go here, but with your counseling background, say the not that he continued to be defiant, but
Mhm,
say a 4-year-old or 5-year-old or 7-year-old, like, continued to be that defiant child that
mhm.
kind of felt like they were the one that ruled the roost and they would act up and then get the result they wanted, even though they maybe have been disciplined or routinely didn't get the result they wanted, but they feel like they can play that card and
Mm.
eventually get what they want eventually. You probably experienced parents or, whoever in your life, so you probably have a bunch of experience. What tips would you have for that situation?
2 things come immediately to mind. Well, maybe I should say 3. The first is pray for that child because the Lord needs to soften that child's heart, right? So start there. And then 2 additional things that I would add to that. First of all, be consistent in your discipline and always follow through if you say you're going to do something. Don't be one of those people that make vain threats to your children all the time and then you don't follow through. That's not helpful. You're basically teaching them not to trust you if you do that sort of thing. And then one of the things that I would explain to my children, and I would demonstrate this with consequences over time, is that trust equals freedom. And I would tell them, it's like the older you get, the more freedom you're going to want, the more independence you're going to want. You're not going to want me to, be watching you 24/7. You're going to want to be able to, get in your car and go someplace and hang out with your friends and do sorts of, like all sorts of things where I'm not directly present to be the one overseeing every aspect of your life. And if you want that kind of freedom, then what you need to be doing in the meantime is demonstrating that I can trust you. And so if I cannot trust you, then you won't have that freedom. And it's as simple as that. But if I can trust your siblings, they will. So you'll get to watch them enjoy that freedom and you won't have it. And we followed through on that. A few years ago, one of our children, uh, you know, really was making a series of very bad decisions that I thought, okay, if this is something that becomes this child's pattern, later in life, this is not going to play out very well. And the Lord convinced me that I needed to take a very hard stance with this one particular child during that season. And so they basically lost. I had a heart to heart with them, and I said, okay, here's the deal. You essentially lose all your freedom at this point now. And this was trying to think. This was age 15. And I said, "You lose all your freedom. Like, you have no freedom. You cannot hang out with your friends. You don't have a cell phone. The only thing you can do is you can come home, you can go to school, and you can go to work." And, all my kids have had jobs from age 14 on. And so I said, "But that's it. You can't do anything else. And it's going to be for a very long time." And it went for months. And I said, "Don't ask me for your phone. Don't ask me to go anywhere. This is that bad that I will follow through on it, and I want it to be an example to your siblings too. And so let's go. This is the next however many months of your life until I feel like I can trust you again." And even at that point, I had the other siblings come together, the other three at one point. We just spent time praying for this rebellious child, and with tears, and we just lifted this child up to the Lord and said, Lord, please intervene here. And um and i you know and we reinforced all that, and I have to tell you, on the other side, we were really pleased with what we saw. But it was months of the lack of freedom. And but we kept emphasizing, listen, trust equals freedom. So you have the opportunity to earn that trust back, but we're not going to pretend that we trust the decisions you're making when it seems like you're going to take your life in a rebellious direction. That just doesn't jive with what we teach and what we want to do here. And so,
So
yeah, we
picturing that
followed
on
through.
my side,
What's
I
that?
had picturing that episode, like if I was watching a movie, I'm like, tears came to my eyes just
Hmm.
picturing that scene. Was the 15-year-old part of the prayer or
No.
was the 15-year-old separate?
It was during a time when the 15-year-old was separate, and I wanted the other siblings prepared for the hammer I was about to drop on this child. And I said, "We need to be praying for your sibling here." And so they prayed, my wife prayed, I prayed. It was emotional, and the household was ready for what I was about to do, but they also understood why I was doing it. And I also wanted them to be aware this was a cautionary moment for them too. It's like, and just so you know, I love you enough that I'm going to do this for you if you take your life in a bad direction. I'm not going to let you. You're going to have to fight me if, to be able to do it. And I would remind them, also, I will win. You can fight me if you want, but I hold all the cards here and I will win. And so I am not letting you. I am not letting you. As much as I can, I'm going to prevent you from taking your life in a direction that does not honor Christ while you're under my leadership.
I'm
What
out.
you
I'm
what you
leaving.
do
I'm
outside of
leaving.
that, I can't
Dad, I'm
control.
leaving.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's like you have nowhere to go, so have fun. So, but they understood, and they also knew that it wasn't some it what this was not out of the blue, and this is also in a context of, I'm a father who goes out of his way to demonstrate to these children, I love you guys, and they see the sacrifice, they see the time. I'm available to them, I'm not somebody that just shows up when it's time to correct or chastise or discipline. But they also know that when I discipline in a matter like that, it's a demonstration of love. It's not a demonstration of retribution or an act where I don't love them. It's demonstration that I love them enough that I'm going to intervene as best as I can in their life, and try and point them in the right direction.
That's a fantastic example of leading your family. So, I think a lot of guys aren't sure what to do, so they fall into inactivity,
Mm.
and it's like, just take an action, do something. Maybe hit up your people in your life that you can hit up and ask for help and pray and those things, but do something.
And I'll have to say that child repented. The Lord worked in that child's heart, and we all saw a noticeable difference after that. It was a very interesting line in the sand in that child's life, and it was a good testimony to the power of prayer too, because we could see that the Lord was doing something there.
I'm certain
And
you had a history of leadership, and the whole family was probably understanding there was something wrong,
oh yeah,
looking to you for, "Now what are you gonna do?"
do something, Dad. Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, if we're not the captain of the ship and we're not leading,
Hmm.
chaos, absolute chaos, and then in this case, that it sounds like that 15-year-old could have gone a really, really wrong
I
direction,
was convinced that that was a possibility.
a
I had
tipping
a
point
very
type moment.
unsettled feeling that this was a season of life where those lines needed to be drawn. And my wife and I were seeing things that gave us great concern. And we thought we have to intervene in a very, very serious way now before this turns into the type of thing that you're like, uh-oh, what's happened here. And I hope this would encourage fathers, and maybe they've heard this other places too, that sometimes I've heard it said, you're not really a dad until your child tells you that they've hated you at least once, So it's okay. They come around when they're older, so I'm told. And I'm already starting to see this, but I would say, once your children hit the age of like 25, I suspect they'll start coming around and saying, hey, sorry for all the grief that I put you through. Um, but, it somewhere along the way, don't be afraid for your child, to be hated. I remember once saying to one of my kids, I said, "You know what? I did not grow up into an adult man so that I could be bossed around by a teenager. My vision of my adult life was not taking orders from a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old, or it's like, that's not happening." And I remember saying to one of my sons in particular, when you're a dad, I sure hope that you don't take orders from your kids, because that's not the order of how this goes. And they're like, yeah, you're right. So
And that's great too, because they're gonna run into the same situation when they're
they
when they're
sure will. And
parents.
they're going to remember those moments, I bet, and maybe even chuckle.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, us dads, we can be a great example or a very poor example, and our kids are
Right.
gonna learn from it either way.
Yep. Yeah,
Have you got any
absolutely.
advice for, just parenting in general? It sounds like you've got some great philosophies that are well thought through and obviously seen through counseling many things, through being a pastor, many things, and then leading a family of 4.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that are really important. You want your house to be the type of place that your kids are happy to come to, right? And that they wanna be at. You wanna have a
I was just talking to
stable.
Chris Highfield today, and he said exactly that thing this morning.
Did he? Okay. Yeah,
Yes,
I agree then. I mean, it's you want your home to be the type of place that's like a refuge in the sense that Christ is modeled there, the gospel is modeled there, and you wanna be on the same page with your wife. So if you have something you have to work out or disagree about, do so privately. Don't divide your opinions in front of the kids. Do that privately, work on those things, and then support one another. You know, if one of the kids does something that's defiant toward my wife, I always tell the kids, listen, I don't even care if mom's wrong. I'm always on her side no matter what. If it comes down to me picking her or you, I pick her. She is wiser than you. She has lived more life than you. You guys give her a hard time sometimes. I trust her first, you second. Now, I say that comically, but it is true.
true.
And, and they know that, like, I'm being a wise guy when I say those things, but I really mean it. Like she gets the default. I default to her. She's right. And even if she's wrong, she's right. Not literally, but
Yeah,
you see what I'm saying? Like, they know that it's going to be near impossible to convince dad to do anything but hold up the alliance that he has with mom. So they know mom and I are a team, and there's no, I mean, because kids will trying to divide and conquer, right? Even little ones,
mhm,
they'll tell you one thing and then tell mom the other thing, and then before you know it, you and mom are debating something, and you're like, wait a second, they're trying to divide us. This is a plan. This is a plot. So stay united with your wife, and work together. If you're going to disagree about something, do it privately, so that that's not in front of the kids. And then when in front of the kids, be a united front. And also say one of the most helpful things that you could do for your children is love your wife and invest in that relationship. My kids, so now they're older, they're teenagers, and the oldest is 20, and they have gotten to a spot where they have actually told me that they really appreciate the fact that I take good care of their mother. They see that now, they notice that, and I take my wife out to dinner every Friday night. We have a date night on Friday nights. Our kids are old enough that we don't have to worry about babysitters now or anything like that. So that part's cool. It's a lot easier than when they were little. When they were little, it was very hard to orchestrate date nights. I'd usually have, when we lived near family, my mother would come up on Wednesday nights and she would watch the kids for a few hours so that my wife and I could have a date night. Now, many years later here, the way we do it is Friday night we'll go out, and I remember, just a couple weeks ago, one of my sons saying to me, my 16-year-old son said, he said, "Dad, I really love seeing that. I love that you take mom out every Friday night. She always looks forward to it, and you guys always seem to come back just kind of, almost just playful. It's like a you guys are joking with each other. It's obviously been a fun time." And I love seeing how happy it seems to make both of you. And I like the fact that it's setting an example for them, because when they're married, they're going to remember the fact that apparently a healthy married couple has a date night. They're going to remember that mom and dad did this, and that's what's going to be normalized for them. So I think that that's a huge thing. I think keeping your marriage healthy is super helpful when you're trying to parent your children, because you need each other. You got to help each other out.
absolutely. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
great. Yeah, God, spouse, kids.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right.
So that's a huge tip right there. I'm just curious, a routine Friday night date night, go out to dinner. What
What's
did
that
that
look
look
like?
like back then, or what's it look like now?
Yeah, so my wife and I are not complicated people. We don't need a whole lot to entertain us. We have found that we're both kind of creatures of habit. So our Friday night, we go to a place called the Sycamore Grill. It's just a couple miles from our house. We've discovered it's a restaurant that we really like the food,
Yep.
and we like the atmosphere there, and we've gotten to know some of the servers, and so we get a meal there at the Sycamore Grill, and it's in a nice walkable spot nearby where the downtown has a lot of sidewalks and a lot of shops and things. And so after we eat, if the weather's nice, we'll just take a walk through the downtown. And then after we're done walking, it's a little while after we've eaten, there's an ice cream place on the other side
This is my
of
kinda date.
of downtown, and so we'll, go and we'll get some ice cream there. But now the weather's been getting too cold for that part of the routine, so we've recently amended it, and, we'll go to, a coffee place after we eat, and we'll actually get the coffee and then come back to the car, and we'll sit in the car and we'll listen to something either entertaining or useful or informative together. So we'll just kind of queue up a podcast, and we'll sit and sip coffee and listen to a podcast together, and then come home a little bit later, and it's just relaxing. It's just the two of us. We would hang out in a coffee shop if we had one locally nearby that gave
Right.
us the opportunity to do that. Stuff is still we're in Pennsylvania, and, apparently the
Same
goal in
same as here
Pennsylvania
in
is to
St. Louis. Yep, we're
yeah, well,
very
apparently they're
close.
just gonna keep the world shut down forever because, apparently if my wife and I had coffee together in that shop, we might die on the spot. So
Maybe,
we,
maybe.
yeah, maybe. That's what I'm told. I don't know. That's so we just get the coffee and we hang out in the car for now. But the point is, regardless of what we're doing, we don't need something complicated. The idea is that we just hang out together, and it invites conversation, and we daydream together. We talk about some of our goals. One of our goals right now, one of our big goals, we're in the home stretch of paying off our mortgage. And so
Woo.
that tends to factor into our conversations a lot. It's like, all right, how many more weeks? How many more months? It's like we're almost there. So I think we're about 11 weeks away from having it paid off. So
Oh my goodness,
uh,
that's much bigger than paying a car off.
it really is. Yeah, so I've just noticed that we talk a lot about that, like, okay, what are we gonna do, once we get the house paid off? And so it's really just daydream time. We'll talk about the kids, we'll talk about what's going on, and just whatever. I mean, and we try and keep the conversation more fun than anything. A few weeks ago, my wife brought up something related to my work as a pastor, and I had to admit to her, I said, "You know what? I I need a mental break from having to think about that because that's actually stressing me out, and so we'll save that conversation for a non-date night conversation. I need tonight to just be light." And she's like, "You know what? You're right. Let's not talk about work stuff." So we just had a night where we were like, "Yeah, we if we felt like talking about it, fine, we'll talk about it. But apart from that, let's not talk about any of that. Let's just talk about fun things." And so that
That's
was
great.
helpful. Yeah. But that's what a date night looks like for us. Pretty simple, but we look forward to it. Every Friday night we do that. We usually around 6:30 Friday nights. That's what we do.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Drinks are ready, already on your table. That's wonderful. Well, I know, you've got your book coming out.
Yeah.
So you wanna talk about both books, or what would you like to talk about? Because I've read The Mind of Christ, fantastic book, really cool. Love the way you describe things and the different ways it's chopped up. It's an easy read, easy to implement. You can dwell on it and,
Right. Yeah,
really, really enjoy it.
well, thank you. I appreciate that you read that, and that's a book, by the way, that's only available one place. That's available at my website, and it's free. If people want it, it's free. They could download it free at desirejesus.com. And, once a year, I try and, produce something that I can just give away for free right there on the website, and that's, what I put together for 2020 here, and, so the book, The Mind of Christ, that'll be free there for a little while if people want it, they can just download it. Again, it's desirejesus.com, and they'll see it right there, on the page.
54 or so pages long, I think.
Yeah, it's a brief book. It's not
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
like it won't take you forever to read. It's a shorter book.
Sometimes
Um
people get afraid of, "Well, no,
Right,
I'll
they
never
think,
be
"I
able to
don't know,
read a
it's
whole
like an
book."
encyclopedia." Yeah.
It's
Now,
54
the
pages, it's an easy read, guys.
right. The big thing, and we were talking about this earlier, the big thing that I've coming up on May 25th of 2021, I was really excited. I was offered a book deal with Penguin Random House this past year, and I wrote a book. That book is 224 pages, so it's a little bit longer. But it's called Dwell on These Things. And again, it's just about preaching the message of the gospel to your heart and allowing your mind to dwell on it. And that book, if people want to order it, it's available for pre-sale, so it's not going to come back. It's not going to come to your door until the end of May if you pre-order it now. But I'm actually going to do something kind of fun. If somebody pre-orders it, so that I'll tell you where to pre-order. You can pretty much get it anywhere. You get it Target, you get it on Walmart, you get it Barnes and Noble, Amazon. It's available on any one of their websites. But if you want to check out, I actually think christianbook.com is the lowest price what I'm seeing right now for the pre-sale. But if they go to my website, they could just go to a specific page, desirejesus.com/dwell on these things. So desirejesus.com/dwell on these things. And if they pre-order it, I'll give them a digital copy of 2 of my other books for free right away. All they have to do is just screenshot their receipt, send me an email. My email is john@desirejesus.com, and then I'll send you 2 other books for free just as a thank you for pre-ordering it. That'll make me look good to the publisher. So you're really doing me a huge favor if you pre-order the book before it's in stores. You could also wait till it's in stores if the topic interests you. But if you pre-order it, I'll actually give you 2 other books for free, digital copies of 2 of my other books, just as a thank you for making me look good to the publisher. If they see
Yeah, yeah.
pre-orders are good, maybe they'll give me another shot to write for them, right? It was a pretty big honor to be able to write with Penguin Random House this past year, and I thought, wow, all right. So now I need those that like this content to do me a favor and definitely sign up to pre-order it. And like I said, if they screenshot me their receipt to john@desirejesus.com, I'll give them 2 other books for free.
That'd be awesome. I'll definitely order one today
Cool. Yeah.
for sure. So you just sold one.
Awesome. All right. Worth it.
I was floored when my buddy sent me a note and he says, "Oh, yeah, his next book." I said, "Oh, I didn't know about this." And he says, "Penguin Random House." I'm like, "Whoa, that's huge. That is a big, big deal."
Believe me, I'm pinching myself too. When they offered me that opportunity, I was so grateful, and I thought, Lord, you've been so good to me, and just to have the opportunity to have such a big enterprise backing my next thing, really, you can't help but be a bit reflective and just amazed at the journey that the Lord has you on.
And now you've got daily kind of little devotionals on your podcast part of your website.
I do. Yeah, I have 3 podcasts. One is Daily Devotions with Pastor John, and so I share a brief. It's usually about a 4-minute episode,
Yes.
and so people can access that wherever they get their podcasts. They could also find it on my website. Um, and I have the Chapter a Day audio Bible. That's almost at 4 million downloads. Isn't that like that? That cracks me up. I checked the other day. By the end of this month, that's going to cross its 4 millionth download. That podcast alone.
Wow.
And the cool thing about that one, it's a daily reading of Scripture. And there are places in this world where it's not even legal to own a copy of the Bible, but people are downloading that podcast and listening to it. So I feel like a rebel. I feel like a renegade. Getting the Bible to places in the world that I guess these oppressive governments haven't thought to ban podcasts yet.
That's
So we'll get
fantastic.
the Bible there one way or another. And then I have another podcast, sermons, Bible studies, and training, and
Yep.
people listen to sermon content. I just started adding interview content to that as well, so I may be changing the title slightly. But it's people could listen to sermons, they could listen to training.
I was
Coming up,
shocked
we'll have some
today.
interviews.
I jumped there and I see you just interviewed my good buddy, John Ruhlin.
John? Oh
Very
yeah.
well. Yeah, John's a good buddy of mine, and man, he's got a great giftology business and all that, so
Oh yeah. He
I
it
love
was
to
it
promote him.
was a fun interview. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, he's just, I love what he's about and how his message comes across, so it was really, really cool to see you 2 intersect as well. So funny how that works. Well, I appreciate you so, so much. Again, desirejesus.com is where everybody can connect with you, and thank you so much.
Dan, I really appreciate you having me on. Thanks so much for what you're doing to try to encourage and help and serve fathers. Dads, we need the encouragement. So thanks for putting this content out there for people. And I hope it's truly a blessing to your listeners. Thanks for having a heart for that.
Absolutely. I'm buying your book, and the rest of us are too. Have a great day. God bless
Awesome.
you, John.
Thanks, Dan.
You bet. Bye-bye.